If in my high moments I have done some good, offered some service, shed some light, healed some wounds, rekindled some hope, or stirred some wrong from apathy and indifference, or in any way along the way helped somebody, then this campaign has not been in vain.
With your host, Andrew Gordon.
Chelsea Show, welcome to the Yoga Moves You podcast. I have to ask you, is that your real name?
It is. I was born with that name.
Wow, that is so freaking cool.
Proud of it, yeah.
Well, you should be proud. It's unique. I just had an inclination, because I spoke to you first on Instagram, that I might have had something to do with your Instagram handle. But if that's your real name, I'm all about that.
You know, when I was younger, it was hard to try and tell my friends that that's my actual name. These days, you know, I just get tons of compliments, and I'm very thankful to my parents for coming up with something unique. So
heck yeah, you don't even need a stage name. You have the perfect name to stand out.
Exactly. It's pretty cool. So the first part of my name, Chelsea, Chelsea, and then they made my name Shell. So it's like a seashell.
Seashell. It makes sense because you were born and raised in California. So what part of Cali were you raised in?
Representing San Diego.
What? I was just down there a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Where were you?
Marina Del Mar. And
yeah.
At one point, I ended up in like downtown San Diego at a gas station, and I realized that I needed to make a U-turn because it was a little rough. Nothing happened, but you know, my senses were heightened a little bit. It didn't feel like the quote-unquote best part of the city.
Yeah, I can pretty much probably imagine where you were.
Okay.
Yeah. I moved away from there when I was 6 years old. My parents, you know, I'm 29 now.
Yes.
My parents, at the time that they had me, you know, it was still, I come from, to be more specific, San Diego, but Imperial Beach, which is the most southwest city in the United States.
Wow.
So yeah, it borders Tijuana, and at the time that I was born, it just was not exactly the best place. It wasn't the worst, but it just, my parents decided, you know, as far as financially how much it cost to be there and then raising a child, they decided to move up north. And so I never really got to experience San Diego so much when I was young, but my whole family is there now, so I get to experience it in my older life, and I don't have to necessarily spend the money to live there. So
I heard of it being referred to as the Sunshine Tax.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I've never heard of that, but that makes perfect sense. You know, it's such a lovely place, but I just didn't really get to experience it, and I do appreciate my parents trying to put me in a better place. So
where did you grow up? You know, I mean, really, your life starts around like 5 or 6 years old. I don't remember 3 or 4. If you do, that's cool, but where did you actually remember growing up?
I grew up Sacramento. That's been my home base. I moved up the coast, so we lived in the Bay Area, San Jose, Pleasanton type areas for a while, and then by the time though I started first grade, I was already in Sacramento, so I at least got to completely, you know, grow up and go to school in one place.
Yes.
Yeah, so that was nice. Sacramento, you know, I kind of diss on it a lot. You know, there's not a whole lot of culture, but it's a nice place to be as far as, you know, you're so close to Lake Tahoe, you're so close to San Francisco, you know, you can go to the ocean, you can go to the mountains, you could do it in one day if you wanted to.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate the area and the vicinity that it's into, all of the beautiful nature, even though the immediate city is not necessarily nature.
I mean, I don't know that much about it, so I'll take your word for it. I'm an East Coast guy, so straight up.
I was going to say, you're in New York, or?
I'm from New York my whole life, and I lived in Charlotte, North Carolina for like the last 10 years.
I've been wanting to check out the Carolinas. I'm a traveler too, as you know, and I haven't been to the East Coast other than New York, and it was very brief, and it was for New Year, so I'll just leave it at that. It was obviously cold.
Yeah, my family's all back on Long Island, and my uncle and aunt have been down here in Charlotte since 1987. And my uncle summed it up the best I've ever heard. Now the city has grown a lot, Charlotte, North Carolina, since they've been here since '87. But I would still say this is accurate. It's big enough and it's small enough. You know, like there's enough to do, but it's clean. It's laid back, and you have 4 seasons, but they're not killer. The winters aren't brutal, and the summers are hot, but not like crazy, you know? So everything's just about 2 hours from the beach, like an hour and a half to the mountains, depending on which one we want to go to. I love it here.
So it sounds you're like the Sacramento, like East Coast twin kind of. That's pretty.
If you're happy with Sacramento, I'll say, yeah, I'll take it.
It sounds like your area is a little bit better than Sacramento, but I like it. Sacramento is great. It's just, if for being called the city of trees, I'd like to see some more. Let's just go with that. They recently changed it to the farm to fork capital, which it does make sense, but we liked city of trees better.
I did hear, okay, so I had one friend, because I did radio for a long time, and all of our friends, we scattered all over the country, and one of them worked in Sacramento, and he did say it was like a city of cows.
Yeah, we have a lot. I mean, you have to remember that, you see California on TV, they're going to show you the mountains, the beaches, and what you think California is, but California is farmland, and California has a lot of agriculture, and particularly the Central Valley where I come from. And that's all the houses that we live in, and everything that we live on is just old farmland.
Yeah, I drove down from Silicon Valley on Interstate 5 all the way down to San Diego. And
wasn't that fun?
Well, no, see, everyone said that, but for me it was fun because I had never been there before. So
right.
what you're talking about was actually interesting to me. So I realized how much farmland there is in between the beautiful, amazing parts, which are the mountains and the valley, which is just incredible, and the beaches. It's so pretty. But the farmlands in between, what I noticed was, which is sad because of the droughts and because of things like that, were the signs that said
the water.
Yeah. Crops don't grow where water doesn't flow. Like I probably paraphrased that, but I'm like, geez, that's just horrible.
Yeah, they always put government-created dust bowl. You'll see a lot of that's been going on for years because I've been doing that drive my whole life. Or sorry, Congress-created dust bowl. It's really unfortunate. But I mean, we hear so much stuff in the media about global warming, all this stuff, and to whatever you believe, all I can say is eventually we do end up getting the rain. We're all still here. We got to stay positive through this, but. Recently, the Oroville Dam broke, and I think we lost, I don't know what, like the water just flooded into the valley. I'm not exactly sure what became of that, but I know a lot has been happening, but since I was young, they have had those signs up, so we have been needing water for quite a while now.
Yeah, it's just, it really hit me when you see it right in front of your face, like nonstop when you're driving on I-5.
And you see how dry it is. Yeah.
Yes, and it saddened me. Because I know the struggle that not just the people are going through that need, obviously, the crops, but the farmers.
Right, yeah. Yeah, the economy for them and just them putting in, farming is not something, these people aren't millionaires, these people don't get a lot of kickback. It's what they do, it's what they know, and I mean, they're doing it for the people, and it is very hard to see that, And to have it be more of an environmental, though it's environmental, they do control the flow of the water. So it's kind of, I know nothing about this, so it's hard for me to speak on. But yes, it's unfortunate.
There's plenty of reasons, which I'm sure we can get into. That would be a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
I do want to shift back to Sacramento and just ask you the types of things, interests, and activities you were in as a child growing up.
Let's see. So, I was, ever since I was young, I was always very kind of kept to myself. I mean, I am an extremely social person, but I found, if we're going back to young days, I found dancing in my room to VH1 and the Top 40 on MTV when they still had TRL, and just kind of popping that on and closing my door. And I remember I have 2 younger brothers. I'm the oldest. And I remember just living on a block full of kids, but they were all boys. every single one, and every single one.
Oh boy.
And yeah, and I'm kind of a tomboy. Obviously, I love hiking and doing all that stuff. But
Yeah.
I rode the bikes. I went and played in the dirt. I caught the frogs, and I did all that kind of stuff. But typically, you could find me by myself, dancing in a room or talking on the phone.
Yeah.
But yeah, dancing, movement, and just I've always been very in tune with just tempo, and like I've been able to sing without I wouldn't call myself a professional, but I mean, if you hear me in the car or something, you're not going to ask me to stop. It's not that bothersome.
You have a natural ear. You have a good ear.
Yes, that sounds really weird for me to say about myself, but
No, I believe it. I mean, I don't think it's arrogant. I just think it's stating a fact.
Yeah, it's just something I've always liked to do. Me and my mom would just sing in the car, and yeah, I just have always been very organized. I love to clean things, so that was always nice for my mom growing up.
So what did you do after your formative years, your schooling there? Did you take the college route, and or what happened after when you decide to carve your own path?
So I will give you just very quickly a little bit of background just on my high school, just because I feel like that needs to kind of be mentioned.
Please.
I have struggled with anxiety since I remember kindergarten. I remember them saying, oh, you have to choose to play with the blocks or go play house. And I couldn't even make a choice. I didn't know who to be friends with.
Yeah.
I had been struggling with anxiety since before I could tell you how to spell the word anxiety. So basically, once I got around to high school, that had followed me for a long time. And
yeah.
I was always very academically fine. Math was somewhat of a struggle, but never, I was always passing, doing great. School and academics was not the issue. I had a harder time socially.
Yeah.
So going into high school, I moved around a lot, started freshman year in Sacramento area. And then I moved to Idaho to live with my grandma for a while.
Okay.
I was having some personal issues at the time. My parents thought it would be best to send me elsewhere.
Okay.
I was 16. I was rebellious. Us yoga people, we don't come usually from this calm past. We seek it. We're looking for this healing, and that's what brought me to yoga was all this past of not having a tool to deal with this anxiety and these feelings that I was feeling. So just very quickly, I moved to Idaho. I was 16 years old, and I decided to get my GED about a week into my junior year, so 11th grade. And I was able to leave that environment. I took a few years off of school just to basically mess around and do nothing productive. And
well, see, I don't look at it like that. You were self-discovering. I mean, in the moments of where we think we're not doing or we're not accomplishing tasks, aren't we really just finding out more about ourselves?
Absolutely. I think at the time that was what I was thinking I was doing. I was like, how can you not make a choice? I've always had a hard time with decision making as well, and just kind of being, fitting into my skin and understanding that at no point in time is anyone, I own this life. I own this space. I own this body for now.
Yes.
And to live in it, to live in it 100%. And I that has been something that I have been learning to do. And now, as I'm nearing 30, I can finally say I'm starting to get comfortable, but it is still, I think it will always be a journey for me.
Yeah. And the awareness of that is, I think, the best piece. If you weren't aware of it, then I think the suffering would be more intense and prolonged even longer.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So yeah, after high school, I took that little self-reflective break, as we will call it, and then I decided that I want to do fashion design.
in Idaho?
No, I can't. No, I came back to the States. Oh yeah, that would be interesting. Or not the States. Oh my gosh, you can tell I travel. I came back to California.
Technically, Idaho might be another country. We don't know.
Right. Apparently, I feel like it is. No, so I returned to California, and I decided to go to, there was FITM. Most fashion people have heard of FITM. It's the big one in LA, and I couldn't afford that, and I also didn't live in LA. So I
Yeah.
went to a smaller one in the Sacramento area, International Academy of Design and Technology.
Sure.
About 6 months into that, I was like, yeah, I don't like this either. And instead of quitting, which had been kind of a habit of mine in the past, I don't really think it was bad. I think I just recognized something when I didn't vibe with it anymore and would move on. But
Sure.
this is not something that I wanted to finish. I wanted to show myself at this point in my life, Chelsea, can you please finish something?
Do you think that was for you or for the other people in your life?
Um,
I asked because I dealt with that, and I suffered from anxiety too. And I think a lot of times I would quit things because I would feel they weren't right for me, and I would say, well, why would I keep eating a meal that didn't taste good to me?
right. Yeah. I think that before. No, I honestly actually I think I can answer that. I don't really do things for other people.
Okay.
I think I really did do it for me because I paid for it all myself. I didn't get any grants or anything. My parents have always been really supportive in whatever direction I choose. So I don't really think that they affected it. I think it was more pressure that, I did take out school loans to do this. I did already commit to a certain point. So it was partly just that. And then also partly that, if I could prove to myself that I could finish just to the associate's degree, because I do not have a bachelor's yet, and
Yeah.
I may never, I don't know.
Yeah.
But just to get to the associate's degree, just to finish it and just to do it once so that I could start to build the habit from that. Because that's no small feat when you already want to quit 6 months in to complete, 2.5 more years, basically. I'll be honest, I half-assed a lot of it, but I went and I kept going and I committed to the one thing that I committed to, which was simply to finish and pass.
Yeah.
And there's so much that you learn. Like, it was an art school, and it's actually an applied science degree. So moving forward, it actually does help me in other things. It's that I might want to move towards as far as health or biology or psychology or anything like that. So
From the outside looking in, I mean, I'm not in your shoes, but from the outside looking in, it's the process of the journey going through that where you gained references of strength and
right.
perseverance.
Yeah. And I mean, we know that once we start to trust the path that everything happens for a reason. And I met so many people in that time and just learned so much about myself that if I didn't spend that time doing that, I wouldn't be where I am now.
So what happens after school?
After school, okay, so I finished up there and okay, well, this is where it gets we kind of skipped a few places in here, and this may be a part where, I'm going to be very open right now because I believe that's what your podcast is about. However, if this is not something that you would like to broadcast, I completely understand as well.
No. As long as you're okay with it, I am nobody's judge, and I'm an open book, and I have my own issues, and I think that perhaps what you're about to say could help other people.
I think it will. At the risk of, I realize that not a lot of people may understand this, but I do know that I have met so many people along my path who do understand this. And yoga is for everybody, but you don't have to be. I found it because when I was 19 years old, I moved to Reno, and actually I was going to school at this time. I was crazy, and I would drive from Reno to Sacramento just to go to school. Three times a week. Sometimes I would go back because I had a boyfriend and I was also working.
Yeah.
I moved to Reno when I was 19 years old to kind of escape Sacramento, the boringness of it. And I got a job. I was working full time. I'd always been very good at getting like management style jobs, even when I was young. But I was wearing myself really thin and I didn't really have a life. And at that point, I decided, I was like, okay, how can I make some more money? And, that's really my only thought at the time. I was 19 years old. There was nothing behind it. I said, okay, I want to have fun and I want to make more money.
I get it.
I found myself in Reno, Nevada, and a friend of mine who was a hairstylist, and we kind of joked about it one day. She's like, I'm going to go try dancing or whatever. And so I did it like a crazy person.
Yeah.
And I did. And I went and I did that. And I stuck myself into an environment that I had no idea what I was doing. It was so interesting to me to see the way that it worked and to see the way that women were, because I was so shy in high school, so shy that I left, halfway in, that I couldn't, and I didn't really learn how to function well with other women.
Yes.
because, you know, my mother, she's a beautiful person, and she has given me everything that I have, and we have the closest relationship. But when I was young, and she was, you know, also young, she did not have the best relationships, and she has been remarried 3 times, and, you know, it's been kind of hectic.
Yes.
And I did not learn necessarily how to, you know, just love my fellow women. You know, I didn't know what womanhood was. I also don't have sisters.
Totally
you know,
understand it. And you grew up on a block with all boys.
that too. Yeah. You know, it's funny when we start to talk through things, it starts to make more sense. Like,
Yes.
So I ventured into that realm, and I stayed in that realm for a while. But during that time, I was learning a lot. And during that time, I met the one person who really introduced me to both, you know, I had been practicing yoga, but it didn't stick yet. You know, I just kept going. It was a physical practice. I didn't know anything about the philosophy. I knew it made me feel good. I just didn't quite understand how it was a lifestyle, and how it can seep into just everything if you let it.
Yes.
And so let me catch up to where I was. So I met Kiana. Hopefully she doesn't mind me mentioning her name.
Well, I can always silence that.
She totally won't mind. But so I met Kiana, and she was just like the queen bee of the club. She just, not because she was like, I mean, she was a hustler, but because she just had this heart about her, and you could approach her about anything. And one of my friends connected me to her, and she was like, she knew I knew about yoga, and she's like, you need to speak with Kiana. I didn't know why, but I was like, okay, let me find this Kiana. You know, I knew who she was, but she was so good at what she did that I had never spoken a word to her, you know?
Yes.
So she was like, I had idolized her basically in this small frame of our job.
Oh, sure. Yeah. She knew what she was doing and how to profit from it.
Yeah, she was amazing. So I approached her one day, and I was like, hi, you know, Lacey said I should come and talk to you. Hi, I don't really know much about yoga. And she just kind of looked at me, and she took my hand, and she was like, you should come to Nicaragua. And I was like, huh? And,
what?
and she was like, I currently am building a retreat right now in San Juan del Sur, and I think you should come. And I hadn't traveled yet, and I was like, I want to go. You know, I didn't know where I was going. I don't even think I knew where Nicaragua was. I didn't care. I was like, I'm going. And so that was the first step. So she invited me, and the first step was saying yes. And I just kind of want to reiterate, the first step is saying yes.
Absolutely.
So I did. I said yes. And from there, I got on that plane, and I went there, and it was hot. and I was like, wow, what is this place, you know? And it was my first experience just being anywhere other than Mexico, like with my family, or being
Sure.
like on a family trip like that. So I went there. It was my first experience also living in like a sustainable community, and having to, you know, obviously I've done my own dishes, but having to constantly look after yourself and share space. I was not always the best at that. I really, you know, I was not very good at sharing space. I think
Can you explain, like, for people listening, and also really for myself, a little bit more in detail what sustainable community consists of?
Sure, yeah. So a lot of the food that we would eat was grown in a garden that was right outside the door.
Okay.
And as you shower, a lot of that water was caught into a catchment system, and then it was fed into the garden, because, you know, there's nothing on us that cannot be fed and put into the water. And, you know, we're obviously being mindful of the products that we're using. We're not using a bunch of stuff that contains anything that we wouldn't want to be absorbed.
No.
So a sustainable community, it just has to do with how they operate and how they do things. We had chickens. Everything that we had to do was on our own. You know, we do our own laundry. All the cooking was done. It's organized very well. So somebody cooks, and somebody, you know, does the laundry, and everything's just, you know, the meaning of sustainable. Like, you technically, for the most part, do not need outside sources, or that's what we were working towards, because it was still very new. Yeah. We had a rain catchment system. So all the water that you would drink, you know, it's not like the States where they're trying to regulate the water that you can catch from the air.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of blew my mind. And yeah, it was just really neat. And, you know, if you've never traveled and you don't know what it's like to go to a foreign country, you know, the septic systems are very different. You have to be mindful about how you can't just flush toilet paper. So
Yeah.
you have to get used to those sorts of things, because that's just not how it is in the States, and I don't, you don't really give it a second thought. So
Yes.
I just learned a whole lot more about, what things were kind of luxuries that people probably don't consider luxuries, but definitely are. Um,
That's a great
and
experience. It's eye-opening.
it really was. And I can tell you, I was probably the biggest wrench in the system there, because I hadn't traveled yet. I didn't really know how to function in a community. I was like, I was positive, and I made sure I woke up early and asked her. I was like, what can I do? I'm very punctual, and I'm very, have always been really hyper aware, which is why I think I've had anxiety. I guess I kind of changed my perspective on it. And that's what's helped me cope with it, is I can view it as anxiety, or I can view it as just being very sensitive and maybe being aware and being able to help people.
Well, isn't everything either a tool or a weapon?
Exactly. So I'm still in the midst of learning perspective, and I can tell you that perspective, when you change it, wow. You can sit there and have somebody tell you about this, but once you start doing it and you see it and you're like, man, this is all I had to do.
So what happens next in Nicaragua? I'm really enjoying your story. I'm there with you right now.
Thank you. Yeah, it's I'm reliving it. I'm enjoying it. So yeah, I lived in the community, and I was only there for 1 week. And in that 1 week, I seriously learned so much.
I believe it.
From there, everybody knows of Envision Festival. So I went to Nicaragua.
No, I don't.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right.
And if I don't know anything, I always tell, if I don't know a person or an event or just a thing, it doesn't mean anything, because I'm the first person to say, I don't know a lot. So I would like to know what it is.
I will do my best at explaining this festival.
Thank you.
I'm not like I have never been to Burning Man, and I hope most people know what Burning Man is, but it's that big one out in the desert.
Sure.
So yeah, this is kind of a smaller scale, but it's also pretty well known over here, and it's called Envision Festival, and it's always held in Costa Rica and Playa Hermosa, I believe, is where they're still doing it. That's also the same beach where they hatch the turtles, so they're being a little more apprehensive about it these days.
Okay.
But so I met a German friend of mine at the retreat, and we became friends. And he was also, I just want to mention really quick before I get sidetracked, but just a really, really, really huge influence in how learning from example, because he was a fruitarian. Okay. Again, something I had never heard of before.
What is that?
The guy only ate fruit, strictly.
A fruitarian. Okay. I'm being for real. Again, another thing I've never heard.
He only ate fruit. And
where does he get his protein from? Like, what's a fruit that has protein? Banana?
I don't know. I know that some fruits have protein, but if we're looking at the typical proportions of things that we should have, he's not getting them. He wasn't.
Yeah.
But the things that he had to share with me were amazing, and I could see from his eyes that he just was clearer in the mind than I had ever seen in most people. So at the time, I was, just to kind of wrap it back around, he was the person we met, we became friends, and he was going, well, we all went to Envision Festival, everybody that was at the community in Nicaragua at the time.
Yeah.
Him and I carried on after that and traveled to Costa Rica, but we all went to Nicaragua, and I gravitated towards him because he was so extreme, and I had no self-control. And I was watching this guy just say no to things and not even be affected. He had complete contentment. He had found that. I saw him later on as we got to know each other better, and I actually went to visit him in Germany. I got to see that he was, none of us are perfect, and he had things that he too was working through. But for me,
never hang out with your heroes.
Yeah. That's a good one. Wow. Yeah. But for me at the time, I'll be honest, he frustrated me. I was like, why are you so freaking self-controlled, and where's the bread and the cheese, And I hadn't really, clearly I was not on a yogic diet yet, and I didn't understand how food also affects the mind. I wasn't there yet.
Yeah.
And so he was my first example of that, though. And just like, I remember, and this is why to this day I choose to lead by example versus trying to drill things into people's head, because it didn't work for me. But I did know what did work for me was feeling the frustration inside when someone had more self-control than I did, or just noticing that I couldn't say no, to anything, or that I would get mad when I was not fed immediately, or didn't get what I wanted, or whatever it was, it's so nice to have, I still struggle because I'm human and I'm not perfect, and I get cravings all the time. But he was my first example of that. And I really, 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 really think it was important for me to meet him, just to learn those things. We no longer speak, so and not for any reason at all. We just kind of went our own way. But I think it's one of those things, how you just come across people in your life.
Absolutely.
And then when it's done, it's also done. Like, we knew that we had information to pass on, and then we went on. And I really, really feel like I didn't know it then necessarily. I knew he was a spiritual person, but I didn't know it then, just how much he was teaching me. And it wasn't until I got to go home and kind of, because it's easier to find, foods that aren't contaminated with pesticides and things like that when you're in other countries, South American countries or Central America. And Germany doesn't, that's where he was from. They don't allow that kind of stuff. Their culture is very different. So when I was there, it wasn't hard to find foods that were whole and good for me. When I came home, I struggled because I was on my own, and I was like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? I didn't know how to make anything. I didn't know where to find the things that I needed, at the Safeway. Yes, yes, of course they have the organic section, and I do go there a lot. I'm not saying Safeway is bad at all. I'm saying, for certain things though, I had to make a lot of adjustments to my diet, especially these days. I don't have any yeast or processed foods, and it's hard. It's very hard. And it was, I think, the first few months or years where it's the hardest, just trying to figure out what you can even eat anymore, because I was worried about what I was putting into my body and how it was going to toxify me. I had done so much detoxification that I didn't want to contribute to toxifying myself again. So I created a lot of stress over that for a while, but then eventually...
I wanted to ask you, is there a point where it becomes so you got to figure out this balance, I'm asking, where it becomes so extreme that it causes anxiety and discomfort, as opposed to the other side where you're aware of it and you listen to your body and say, okay, these foods I have to moderate. These foods make me feel bad. Get rid of those. These foods make me feel good. A little more of those.
Yeah, at the time, I wasn't paying attention to, I didn't have any dietary restrictions like I do now. Yeah. I just was focused on healing foods and foods that were not processed. Okay. And to be clear, I did not understand yet. I was still eating cheese. I was still eating bread. I did not grasp the concept. I just knew I didn't understand yet. I was just trying. And it takes a long time. I see people, I just want to say this, I see people try and change their diet overnight, and please don't do that. Oh my gosh, don't stress yourself out. It's just too much, It
is. Anything done like that is.
To be fair, this happened in 2014, and I just gave up bread completely 3 months ago. So it's a long journey. For some, it's not that long. For some, it's longer. For me, though, I'm just to put it into perspective, it is, I can now just not touch bread. I don't want it. And I don't want it because it affects my body negatively,
Is that gluten?
Yeah, I don't have a gluten sensitivity. I have candida, I guess. And
okay. Yeah. I've heard of that.
Okay. It's such a weird subject to talk about, but I also think it's very important. I just found out, I noticed that I was having a lot of fatigue, and I noticed that I just wasn't like everyone else. I wasn't. Yeah. I was depressed no matter how much yoga I did. I was just struggling. I was struggling with depression and just a lot. And I didn't know that, this as some of it was from past and in my head, but this was bigger, I could tell. And I started doing some research, and I found this thing about candida, and I basically, because of the symptoms, I was like, this is what I have. And doctors will be like, never do that, never diagnose yourself.
Yeah, of course.
And you shouldn't go crazy on WebMD, but as everyone says too, you do know your own body. And I was right. Since then, I've seen so many different doctors, Western doctors, holistic doctors, and it's definitely candida. And there's really not a whole lot they can do for you. You can assist your healing by using acupuncture, which if anyone here is dealing with candida and you have not tried acupuncture yet, I highly encourage it. It's been the biggest tool in aiding towards my healing.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I cannot express it enough. I'm gonna cry. He reversed my heart murmur. My doctor did, my acupuncturist, and to be able to be here, and I was worried that, you know, I might come to Colombia and it could kind of start again, or like maybe it would happen on the plane or something like that. And I have been pain-free since my last session. I have not had a single bout of it. And it's the first time in probably a year and a half. I didn't know it was a heart murmur. I did not even know. I just thought like my anxiety was causing me this pain in my chest and that it was normal. I really did.
God.
And and he told me, he's like, your heart is, you know, there are different levels of heart murmurs. Mine was very mild, but my heart was regurgitating blood back into it. And it was causing me to feel it. And it was so uncomfortable that when it would happen, which was several times a day, you could see it in my face. I just looked uncomfortable. And, you know, when you live with things for a while, you just get used to it. You don't think about it. And I didn't know that poking needles into my skin could have this type of effect. And now I just feel like it is my responsibility to tell anyone who will listen that this is not alternative medicine. 2 billion people in the world are using this medicine, and it's for a damn good reason.
Yeah, it's a really bad label, you know?
Yeah.
Alternative. No, how about just a form of medicine? You know, like, why is
Right. You know, because obviously, you know, I don't take away from Western medicine. You know, it has its place, and they're so advanced that they can usually catch things a lot sooner. But, you know, but you should always remember to take care of the whole body before you go for, you know, the specific problem.
Yes.
And, or the acute problem is what they call it. So I just, you know, this is all still fairly new to me, and thank you for giving me the space to share that, because this is really, really cool that I know that like people are going to hear this, because that just makes my heart soar. Like it's just worked miracles for me. I can't even begin to explain.
Well, I want to ask you, you dropped Colombia in a sentence before. Are you in Colombia right now?
I'm in Colombia.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that. It's funny.
Yeah. Hola.
Hola, ¿cómo estás? ¿Tú hablas español también?
Muy poquito. Yo estoy aprendiendo.
Okay,
So
you're learning. That's cool.
Yeah, yo soy aprendido. See? Something like that.
It's
Aprendo. Something like that.
Well, are you in Bogota?
I am not. I'm in Medellin.
Okay.
Yeah. Apparently, I was saying Medellin, but it's Medellin here. They have a different accent. So,
I taught English people from Colombia when they say it. Actually, one of my friends here in Charlotte, who lives in America now, he's from there. And when he says it, I'm like, I will never be able to say it like that.
Yeah.
It's beautiful, actually.
It is. They do have a very pretty way of saying things. It's just, it's a little frustrating, because I'm like, I'm going to learn the Spanish, and then the second you cross a border into another country, it sounds different. You're like, you know, but you can compare it.
States.
Exactly, and that's what I have to remember. I'm like, yeah, but if you go from California to Texas to the East Coast, there's different dialects and different accents, and so yeah, and plus we're both English teachers, so we know that. Yeah. So we know how it just changes, and how it's fascinating, but it can also it's hard when you're trying to learn the language.
I remember having so many students that spoke Spanish in a class, but all from different parts of the world. So I had some people from like Honduras and Mexico, and then I had Argentina and Venezuelan people, and then I had a couple of girls from Spain, and and then from Ecuador, which is a totally different accent. I knew none of this, but then they would explain to me, and then I would hear it, and I was like, oh, well, I mean, it's no different than, you know, regional dialects here.
Yeah, I've heard Spain and like these South American countries is where the big difference kind of comes in. Because I hope to go to Spain here very soon, so I'm looking forward to seeing the difference. Yeah.
So I need to catch up with you. You practice yoga, and now you're traveling around, but I want to come to where the point that you chose to take a teacher training. What was that like? Where did you take it? And then we move forward from there.
Perfect. So that's going to bring us full circle back around to Nicaragua. Everyone that was in that community had done the same teacher training through We Are One Flow yoga in Reno. And my teacher was Melissa. She was amazing. And Melissa Martinez, and she still does teacher training. So, and this is how you know. What's up? And Sarah Gale was also her assistant. She was wonderful.
Hey, Sarah. Hey.
So there have been, where was I going with that sentence? I don't even know.
Training in Nicaragua.
It's when my path started. Like my path started the second that I said yes to go to Nicaragua. I know that now. And, obviously I was on a path before, but the knowing path, the path where I was aware and I could feel that I was finally aligned. So I was there at the retreat, and I hadn't done a yoga teacher training yet. I was already teaching yoga because yoga had been in my life, and I said, I want to do this. And so I before I had gone to Nicaragua, I had asked to teach out of a church here and there, or anyone who would let me teach. My classes were not necessarily, now that I've been more educated in yoga, looking back, it's kind of laughable what I was teaching, but it doesn't matter because the intention was still there. So anyone teaching, if you are teaching, keep doing it. It doesn't matter. Just give that knowledge. And so from there, they were like, everyone took me aside. They were like, Chelsea, you need to do this training. And they're all Bhakti yogis. So,
Bhakti devotional yoga.
Yeah. So there's 4 paths of yoga. Bhakti is one of them. And Bhakti is the path of devotion. And in Bhakti yoga, we do lots and lots of kirtan, which is chanting mantras.
Yep.
And so this style of yoga, you're still, we do vinyasa flow, but the style of yoga was new to me. I did not know what the heck I was doing. I was like, wait, what? I like to sing, but I have to sing with you guys. What's happening right now? I was like, huh? Which is funny because it's my favorite thing now, and anyone who tries it, it will most likely become your favorite thing. Yeah. But it was foreign to me, and I didn't know what I was doing. But I did know it made me feel so good, and I didn't care, and I wanted to keep doing it. So yeah, I did that teacher training, and it opened up my eyes, and that was in 2015. So it was 3 or 4 years ago.
Sure.
And I still remember that point in my life as being I gave myself space. I gave myself time to heal. I allowed myself to be where I was. And, sorry, I'm tearing up. Typical of me. That training gave me just so much, it gave to me. I feel like I've done 2 trainings, and I walked away from that one feeling like I had in me so much to give. But I had only taught a few times before that. And so now knowing how God, seeing how all these other teachers, were so good and, in my mind, and I just wasn't there yet. It was actually after I did the training, I felt like, oh my God, I'm not ready to teach now. And I think this is important to bring up because I know that so many people experience this. They get out of a training and they're like, yeah, no, I'm not ready to actually teach.
I think the questioning never stops. And
it never does. It never does. And if it does, I think you should do another training or something because, there's so much to learn. Yeah. There's so much to learn, and it just never stops. So, yeah. So from there, despite all of my fears, I do as I always do, and I do anyway. And I kept teaching and I kept doing it. And,
So how did you end up into this world of being a teacher traveler or a teacher who travels?
So from there, I ended up going back home, and I did a teacher training at a more corporate yoga studio, Core Power Yoga. Shouts to you guys. Love you. And I just want to give them, they may be corporate, but man, do they equip you with the skills to at least
I've heard good things about them. I don't know much, but from anyone who's been on this show and talked about, I've heard good things. So I'll just go with that.
Yeah. I just want to say that I think that, being on my path, I think I was meant to have both. I think I needed to have that path of devotion, that bhakti. I needed to have that space first to understand, to absorb. And then I was ready to start breaking down asanas and, learning cues and just the stuff that comes with teaching.
Yeah.
So those things I got from core power yoga. And when I left that training, I got hired on to work at the studio, which was really cool. It was really, really cool what they did for me. They skipped my internship. They usually have you do an internship for like 3 or 6 months or something, and
Sure.
you don't get paid. It's just an opportunity to teach, because
It's an apprenticeship. Yeah.
right, as most of our people who teach, very few of us typically come out of a teacher training and go right into teaching. It can be hard, it can be intimidating, and
Yeah.
it's just hard sometimes to find a good place where you fit in. And a lot of us don't know our niche yet. We don't know what it is that we have to share. So
Exactly. It takes time.
right. So core power gave me that space. So moving forward, I got, I felt like I really got my grounding foundational skills from there. And that was where I started teaching.
Beautiful.
And yeah, so I was so nervous, even to this day, if it's time for me to teach, like I am like, which is funny because everybody's coming here to relax. But as a teacher, we want to give, and we want to give so much. And we want to make sure that the things that, we're trying to communicate go across. And I just put so much pressure on myself with that in the beginning. And
but there's something to be said that when you find your true voice, that for you, from what I'm listening, I've never taken one of your classes, but the visuals in my mind, I love your vulnerability. And that doesn't mean that you're wilting into a dying flower in the class and having a breakdown. It just means that you're coming from a place of authenticity, and you are more vulnerable than maybe some other teachers who come in a little bit more commanding, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's being who you are to the truth. And I think that's the best place to come from.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I'm learning that about myself right now, that this is probably going to be a lifelong journey for me.
Oh, yeah.
Yoga, probably, as in it will be. As we know, we usually gravitate towards yoga. Typically, it can be for a physical practice, but you find out almost immediately what it does for your mind.
Oh my
And
God, yeah.
and I just, it's been my tool, and I've just held on to it. But I come from, like I said, from kindergarten, had experienced anxiety. I've experienced anger. I'm not quite sure where it comes from. I spent a long time being angry over being angry.
I think I know where your anger comes from now. I will say that I'm a psych minor, and I'm also very intuitive. And I've dealt with a lot of different things, and I've always been, like you kind of grow up and you, amongst your peers, you just fall into the role of like whatever your role is. My role was always like the counselor, the friend. You know what I mean?
Yes, yes, yeah.
Even girls I wanted to date, like they just talked to me about the guys they were dating. I was like, but I would help them, Right. And I still feel like that's a big part of me. And I did minor in psych, and I'm not saying that has anything to do with what I'm about to say, but I have a feeling that the situation with having 3 different, father figures come into your mom's life may have been some sort of root to that. We can find a lot of things from our childhood.
Yeah, it's funny how we can mentally block things. I'm really glad that you're giving me the space to be vulnerable, because I think it's okay. First of all,
it's a safe space. First of all, there's no judgment here, and if anyone were to judge on this show, they wouldn't even I would delete the interview. So
yeah, I mean, I think what I'm kind of finding through my path is that I am kind of I am showing people that it's okay to be in progress and be teaching at the same time and be giving, because technically we all are, but I wear it on my sleeve. I don't hide it. I am perfectly okay with being vulnerable. I'm perfectly okay with being honest. I'm perfectly okay with crying. These are emotions, and I have learned to deal with them by being open. And I know that makes some people uncomfortable, but it is a coping mechanism for me. So,
but when did being human become an issue that we're not allowed to be?
Right. I think, I don't think it was anyone who put that pressure on me. I think I created it myself. I think that,
Sure.
I don't know. I built up mental blocks. I built, these things. And I'm really glad you mentioned that, because about maybe possibly having 3 different father figures. Because yes, my mother's second husband, there was a lot of drama. And he was there because my parents got divorced when I was 6 years old. And so he was there for those important years of my life where I was growing, where I was a teenager, where I, needed the adult figures in my life where they were heavily influential.
Yep.
So yeah, that's funny that you point that out, just because I knew that, but we build mental blocks, and I don't often
to survive.
Right. I don't often think about that anymore, and I really can't go into detail about the
Sure.
severity of it, but if I were to share it at people,
you don't have to go there. You don't have to.
I won't.
I'm intuiting on this and just saying.
Yeah, I will put into perspective. If I were to share, people would be turning this up, and we would get a lot of viewers right now. But
it's just I can feel that it's I get it what you're saying without having to say.
Yeah, and I don't want to say anything. I'm not getting at that anything negative, like crazy negative happened, but there was just a lot of series of events that, just that when you just said that, I was like, oh my gosh, I already forgot, that those things have affected me. So yeah, and I think it's funny when people ask me about yoga, how it always ends up here, what we're talking about right now. It never ends up like, it typically ends up back to family, like, and choices you've made, and it never ends up like, it's not always pretty. And I did get the chance to listen to a few of your podcasts before, and I'll be honest, I was a little nervous, because I was like, a lot of people see my Instagram, and a lot of people see, what it looks like online, and that's online. And I do my best to be honest, but I do my best to keep it positive for the most part, because we've got enough negativity. But in that positivity, I've always been pretty brutally honest. And I think people appreciate that about me. And to be 100%, I want to say thank you so much, because I am actually, if we do choose to keep that part into this podcast, this will be the first time that I want to kind of open up about what I chose to do as a job for a while, just because I feel like it affected how I had to grow as a person, and the extremities that I've experienced. And that, I thought I had to be perfect to teach yoga. I thought that, how are people going to learn from me if I'm not like good? I'm not good inside.
But isn't there such a beautiful thing that path led you to the person who led you to this path?
Right.
That to me is where the most amazing part of the story is, and the most nourishing part of the story is that's where you met this crucial figure, not knowing that would happen, by taking that path and that step to just survive and to make money, but it led you to that, So I don't think there's anything wrong with it at all, actually.
Well, and just how many women out there, have jobs like this, whether it's, in a club or, whatever it is that you're doing. I don't care what the extreme is, that, you are as worthy as anyone else.
Yes.
And, sorry, I get choked.
Your roles don't define you. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons that yoga helps us with.
Yeah. I think the connection between the two is where I've learned is my gift.
And then you get to share it.
Yeah.
So I'm happy that you're doing that. Really, I really am. And you go to these trainings, and you clearly were picked out at the Core Power one as someone who's going to be good at this. Like, they're like, hey, we see this in you, which is great. And you nourish your more aesthetic skills of teaching, which were built on top of the bhakti, which is like this deep devotional yoga, which not everyone is privy to. And I think the combination of both is awesome that you're able to do that. And now you're able to travel around and teach. So I want to ask you, now I don't want you to snub any of the places that you've been privileged to travel to and teach, but if you had to pick, okay, like, I mean, I don't even want to use the words like life or death situation, but just like, if you had to pick, okay, in your mind, what has been your favorite destination and why? And by no means is this saying the other places weren't as great and beautiful. I would just like to know.
I have 3 top places of the places that I have been. It would be hard for me to put them into order, but if I had to, I would go in this order. It's hard to choose the first 2. Bali and Mexico.
Okay.
Like, specifically Mexico, I would say just the Yucatan area. Like, yes, Tulum was amazing, but that whole peninsula, I feel, is freaking magical. All the cenotes and all the stuff up there.
Tell me why.
You know, as an American from the U.S., North America, it's easy because you can speak English, so it's kind of easier to get around. But it's untouched. Their pace of life is slower. I just felt, you know, I can't tell you how many emails I got or, you know, DMs that I got when I was there from friends of mine, like, oh my God, you're driving around Mexico. I'm like, first of all, I'm not on the West Coast of it, and not saying that, you know, but that's generally more where the stuff is going on.
Yeah.
And second of all, yes, it's safe, people. You know, law of attraction. If you attract trouble, it will come, and vice versa. So,
yeah.
So yeah, I did everything safely and I made plans, but as far as why this place resonates in my heart, I recently visited there very, very recently, and I just the feel, it's hard to explain, and just the ease of which I could get around and just talk to people. And, you know, I did not know Spanish when I went there. My Spanish is still, I'm learning, but I, was motivated to learn once I left there. I started Rosetta Stone when I got there because I was like, holy cow, I don't know like anything.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't even ask, like, tienes, do you have, like, I couldn't ask the simple things. I didn't know, derecha, izquierda, I didn't know anything.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it was hard, but the only reason I could get by was because, you know, most of them speak English. And if they didn't, I was traveling with an Australian friend who had basic skills. So we were able to make it. So I started my Rosetta Stone and started learning, but just to really, like, I can't really give a full answer. The cenotes, the history, you know, everybody who knows, like the Aztecs and the Mayans, they were earthly people, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And yoga sometimes, I don't know if, I mean, I can go completely esoteric and I can go in that direction with you, you know, and start talking sutras and all that kind of stuff. Sure. You know, but even beyond the sutras, like, it kind of ties into like sacred geometry and all those things. And, and it comes back to, you know, the way these pyramids and everything, like, it's deep. And I have knowledge of those things that I'm starting to touch on and really starting to understand. And there was a lot there for me to learn, and there was a lot there for me that I understood and I felt. And you know, it's going to be different for everyone, but I felt connected. And
I mean, you look at those things and you're like, where the heck was the bulldozer and a tractor? You know what I'm saying? And there's something that's so amazing that you cannot deny.
Yeah. It's for real. It's crazy. Yeah. So in Mexico, Mexico only because I was there most recent, but Bali and New Zealand. And I just want to quickly share, because obviously everybody loves, you know, you only hear positive things about Bali, but Bali is only one island in Indonesia, everybody. It's very tiny compared to the big chain of islands, and it differentiates from the rest of them. It's basically like someone picked up Hawaii, threw it there, because that's what it looks like, but took the heart of India and put it in there. So that is Bali.
That's awesome.
And that is why Bali is like hard to leave.
That's
you know, there's great food, great people, you know, so easy to get around. It's, you know, cost effective, yoga everywhere, and not just the yoga, the way that they do things is very so the rest of the country is mostly Muslim, and the way they do things, though, kind of carried over from India. So a lot of their beliefs, you know, they cannot usually afford to cremate their dead immediately. So you will see cemeteries, and typically they bury them until they can't afford it, because in their belief, you know, they're very spiritual people, very earthly people, and they always cremate and throw back into the ocean. And I learned so much when I was there, something I believed in, and I almost started a blog called the Backseat Blog, because I noticed when I was traveling that I love to ask questions, and I'm so interested in talking to the locals, but not everybody is. And I found that locals were like really, really like enjoying that I, you know, was asking them questions, and that I understood too, because I came from a yogic background. Very cool. So yeah, I think Bali is something that if you do yoga and you're looking for, you know, to connect with the spirituality, but also have a good time, you know, Bali's a great place. But coming back to traveling as a solo traveler, Bali is also extremely safe and extremely easy to navigate. And trust me, you can go there alone, but you will never be there alone.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
So I highly, recommend that place if you're a first-time traveler looking for somewhere safe but also far to go.
And what about New Zealand?
New Zealand, yeah. New Zealand is so untouched, and New Zealand is just gorgeous, and they speak English, so there's that.
Yeah, that I know.
But even they have a really deep-rooted history that I didn't really know too much about. They also have the Maori people, and which are the native people to the land,
Okay. Yep.
And if you go there, I highly, highly encourage you to really, really reach into that history, because it's fascinating. It's beautiful. And so in New Zealand, I lucked out and I met another traveler friend of mine, which I want to shout out, Brandon Collins. You're awesome.
What up?
Where was I? I was in Fiji. No, I was in, oh my gosh, where was I? I don't know where I came from, but he was like, hey, do you want to meet me? And it just started raining, so it's really loud. This Colombian rain, I'm telling you. Maybe you don't know, but it's heavy. Okay.
For real?
Yeah, like you can barely hear anything. Like I turned my laptop all the way up to watch my Netflix that night, and I can't hear it. Okay. So coming back around, my friend, he was there, and he was like, hey, he does tattoos, and he has friends there who, were allowing him to work at the tattoo shop, and he knew that I was an adventurer, and he was like, I was in Hawaii. I was visiting another friend in Hawaii. And he was like, do you want to meet me in New Zealand? And I was like, yeah. And so I packed my stuff and I bought a ticket like the same day, I think, and just went there. That's another thing, you got to say yes. You got to start to take opportunity when it arises, because one of the number one things I get from, I'm going to see if I can move. I don't know if you can hear that in the background. But
no, I do. It's okay. It's ambient. Whoa, hey.
Yeah, no, it gets really bad. Hang on. Oh, no, can't go up there. Wow. Okay, I guess this is going to be the place I can be for now. So if it gets too loud, just let me know. Okay. I just want to say that, to travelers, and one of the number one questions that I get is like, how do you decide that you're going to do it? How do you go somewhere alone? Like, how do you do it? The first time I, went to Nicaragua, and after that, people start to see that you're traveling, but you got to say yes. You got to take a risk, and I highly encourage just saying yes. Try it. If you hate it, come home. But you got to say yes, because wasted is a very strong word, and I did not waste anything. I spent more time than I would like to admit waiting to travel. Waiting on someone else to have the perfect travel plans for me to go with,
So are you leading retreats? Are you teaching trainings? What are you doing when you travel?
Currently, right now, since I left Core Power Yoga, yes. I have started a business with a friend of mine, Christina, and we are called Peak Foothills, and we are a yoga hiking company is kind of the best way to describe it.
Cool.
And yeah, it's been really neat. We have organized a few things kind of leading into this, and she is finishing her school. She has a few weeks left. I'm here doing this, and then from there we are developing a schedule, and what we will be doing is leading outdoor yoga and hiking day things, and sometimes just outdoor yoga. We'll do some in parks, and sometimes just strictly hiking. She's a nutrition major. She has done an amazing job on her body, and she just knows so much about nutrition that I just wanted to partner with her.
Is that going to be back in the States, in Cali?
So that portion of it, yes. So Peak Foothills comes because we're from the Sierra Foothills.
Okay.
And so yes, that portion of it, while I'm home in the summers, I will be leading classes outdoors and then workshops as well as retreats. So we're developing the retreats as of now, and I'm actually also speaking with someone who reached out to me very recently about leading retreats in a few really awesome destinations. I believe Bali was one of them. So it's happening very fast for me since I decided to leave the studio, the independent way of it. But I would also, and please bring me back because I know I tend to trail off.
No, you're good.
But I was marrying traveling and yoga because I I found these two loves, and I couldn't give up yoga. I wanted to teach, but I found that I really love traveling, but it's very hard to teach when you're traveling because you don't have a place to teach. You don't, I'm building my name right now. I feel like I'm starting to, have the time to really focus on, I have all the things that I need now. Now I need to, get people to see me, I guess, so that I can, if there's anyone out there who resonates with me or whatever, that they can find me, and I can find them.
Well, I feel your passion for it. And I think that, when you free up space by letting go of one thing, it opens up a lot of space for the next thing or things. So
yes, absolutely.
In my mind.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So I forget where I was.
So what we were talking about, setting up your retreats. And I just want to ask you, you mentioned about, in the notes that I have, being in nature, you can learn a lot of lessons that you can't really learn being in the industrialized world. What's one of the best takeaways that you've learned in your travels being immersed in the middle of nature?
That it's all we are. Everything else is subjective. It's really not, you can't fight nature. You can't fight the proof. You cannot fight, you can be of any religion, and I support everybody's beliefs. I really do. And I support all philosophies. I kind of don't care what other people, I don't, you can believe, you can believe what you want. It really doesn't bother me.
Just don't hurt. If you're not hurting me or anybody else, then do what you want. I don't care.
But I think what I learned through every path of, I've read a little bit of the Bible. I cannot say I've read all of it, but my grandparents are extremely religious.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, if you want to speak on something, it helps to know a little bit about it. Politics, just kidding. But so I read a lot of books, and I read the Bible, I read the Gita, and I started reading just like a lot of different spiritual things. I dipped into like Mormonism just because I was curious about it, just curiosity. And what I found through all of them was that the one thing that remains the same is just energy.
Yeah. And they basically say that, the tenets of yoga can connect with the tenets of, as far as I know, almost any religion or philosophy. Do good, the golden rule. It's a lot of the same things, just delivered in a different envelope.
Right. So I really just from nature, I learned what I needed to know. And I would like to recommend a book to anyone who
please
feels like they need anything right now. But Siddhartha was a great book about a yogi who sat by a river. And he learned a lot about himself. He wasn't perfect. It's about his path of life. He started out, and I believe, if I remember correctly, he was born into more of a spiritual path. And yes, that's right. He was trained by Buddha himself. He followed the Buddha.
Okay.
And one day, and he was with his friend Gopala. Everybody knows Gopala, hopefully, or Govinda. And Govinda stayed with Buddha and learned from Buddha. But Siddhartha left. And Siddhartha didn't leave necessarily because he was tempted. He left because he was curious and he wanted to know. And so he went out into the world, and he experienced material things. He found wealth. He tried wine. He drank, he ate gluttonous foods. He enjoyed women. He did all of the things that we would do in the material world. And he got married, and he had a son. And he left that life and eventually started living right again, or according to yogic standards. And, he left. He was living in a small village. And what happens is his son finds him later. And, I won't tell the whole book, but it comes full circle to teach you about yourself. And what I think I'm mentioning this for is that, you can't just come from perfection. You can. Maybe some people are close to perfect and remain that way, but I think it's important to experience. Earth and this realm, I feel, was made for that. We're not necessarily meant to be perfect. We're meant to experience. It's what we learn from it and where we go from there.
Amen.
That is important. So if you're at a point in your life where you are, not there yet, and you're still, experiencing with maybe, I don't know, addictions or just whatever it is, unhealthy behaviors or things like that, it's okay to be where you are right now. Keep working forward, because just being placed on this earth was not an easy thing. So
yeah, it was, the odds were stacked against you.
They were stacked against us. So go easy on yourself. Yeah. Go easy on yourself, and just every day try to make one decision that's better than the last day.
I love that. And I think that's a perfect spot to end on. I would like to ask you to speak of some places where people can get in touch with you, and because I will not type them correctly, if you could send them over to me and we'll put them in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely. So where people can find me, my main feed is my Instagram, and that's Chelsea Shell Yoga. No underscores, all lowercase. Chelsea is CHELSEA.
Yes.
I do not really function on the Facebook right now. And then if you would like to find me and follow me or follow my business page, which is at Peak Foothills, and I'll send you over the spelling, but it's spelled exactly how it sounds, PEAK. And basically those are my two main forms. You can find my website on there, chelseashellyoga.com, which is currently under construction. I'm getting there. I have a lot of blog posts to get up, and I'm working on developing videos right now. Just taking it at my own pace as to not overwhelm myself, but I'm getting there. I love it. I love everybody who's been asking. I promise I'm working for you.
Chelsea, I appreciate you really so much coming on the show, and also being so giving of your story and your spirit. And it means a lot, not just to me, but I know for people listening, to know that they're not alone in their struggle and their challenges, and that, you shared some of your challenges that can guarantee somebody or a group of people, like there's who even knows how many people listening connected with some of the similar struggles, and it's valuable. And I think that's where a lot of the value comes from a podcast medium, is the connection. And by all means, feel free to come back on when you're ready to launch the retreat process.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, I feel honored that you even contacted me. You are so fun to talk to. And I had a great time. I just taught a great class this morning, and then I got to talk to you, and I'm on cloud 9 right now, cloud 10. And yeah, thank you for giving me that space. I'm feeling really great right now.
Well, the feeling's mutual. Chelsea Shell, there she is. Thank you so much for being on the Yoga Musi podcast.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yoga Musi Podcast.